The players are asking about the cable on the engineer's waist.
The cable is just the cable.
Just the cable.
There is no real functionality to it.
Space Engineers 2 will be released in alpha on January 27th, 2025, and is available on Steam now to pre-order. But before you do anything, there was an absolutely massive 3-hour livestream with a huge amount of information about the new game and its future roadmap. So let's go through everything you need to know. To start with, Space Engineers 2 has been in development for around 3 years, and in that time, they've been working on a bit of everything. So a little bit of planets, a little bit of water, a little bit of building, etc, etc, and because of that, nothing was really finished. So around 6 months ago, they pivoted to a new way of working that they're calling vertical slices. The first vertical slice is what will be released in January, and we'll go over what's included in that in a minute, but first, let me explain what the vertical slice releases mean. So, Space Engineers 1's early access was a little bit erratic, as they spent a lot of time adding things that players had requested to the game, and thus they ended up bogged down in early access for 6 years. For Space Engineers 2's early access, they want to focus on the core experience first, and then add other stuff later. Because of this, they're working on the game in slices, working on making sure one area of the game is done at a time and up to a reasonable standard, so that we, the players, can get our hands on it and mess around with it and then give feedback. We'll go over each of the vertical slices in a minute, but basically this means whilst a certain area of the game is complete, the entire game will not be released as a complete product in January. For example, the first vertical slice, which we'll be releasing next month, focuses on the creative mode and making sure that is polished, with planets and survival coming in the next vertical slice. And because Space Engineers 2 is in early access and will not be a complete experience, they're going to continue to develop Space Engineers 1 in the meantime, in order to allow people to still have that complete experience of a game. They've mentioned that 70 people are working on Space Engineers 2 and around 30 people are working on Space Engineers 1. And we've actually seen a little bit of what's coming in the next Space Engineers update, but we'll cover that in a later video. Space Engineers 2 is built on Keen's new engine V-Race 3, and because of this, the performance will be much better for a variety of reasons. Clang is dead due to the new physics engine, and therefore we must worship the cable instead. The visuals are much better than Space Engineers 1, and additionally, Keen have 11 years of experience developing Space Engineers 1, so they know what worked, they know what didn't work, and plan to use that to reimagine Space Engineers in something 10 times better. But it's all good saying that, but what does that mean? What are they adding in Space Engineers 2? We'll go over each of the vertical slices in depth in a minute, but to summarise what they are, the first vertical slice, as I said earlier, will focus on creative mode, and pretty much focuses on the new building tools available in the game. There'll be 3 smaller vertical slices after that, which focus on the workshop, improvements to the UI and accessibility, and then modding respectively. Then there's vertical slice 2, which will be the first big one, which focuses on planets and survival, which as you can imagine will add planets, and additionally it will add the survival mode to the game, and a bunch of new mechanics to go with that. Vertical slice number 3 will add volumetric water, which has been the focal point of many teasers we've seen for this game. Vertical slice number 4 is potentially multiplayer. Number 5 is going to be human NPCs and living universe. Yes, NPCs are coming to Space Engineers 2. And then beyond that, there's a story campaign and a bunch of other things they mentioned as well. Each of the vertical slices have no planned release date, as they don't want to rush what they are working on. They want to release it when it's done. However, as at the beginning of the development, they worked on a lot of areas at once. They have a lot of prototypes of things like water, like planets, like NPCs, like multiplayer. So when it's that feature's turn to be focused on as a vertical slice, they already have a basis to work on. It'll just be focusing on getting that into a presentable state for us. And because of this, they only expect a few months between the first few slices. Starting next Thursday, there will be weekly developer diaries discussing what they are working on each week. And additionally, there's a monthly Keen Software newsletter, which you can subscribe to now, that will also contain details about the progress as well. So, with that out of the way, let's go into detail of what is coming in each of the vertical slices. So, as I said, the first vertical slice will be creative mode, and that's what will be released in January, and it focuses on the core experience of building in the game. They showed off gameplay of this on the livestream where all of this information is from, and I'll be playing that in the background of this video, and this is the vertical slice we know the most about, as it's pretty much done and it'll be releasing soon. They've said one of the main focuses of Space Engineers 2 is the intuitiveness and accessibility of the game. So basically the idea that if a new player gets into the game, they can just start playing the game. They don't need to mess around watching tutorials and all that kind of stuff. They just load up the game, load into the world, and from there they can easily work out what they need to do. I've said this a million times, this is my #1 criticism of Space Engineers. This is why I started my channel, because I was angry that the game didn't explain things to me properly. So the fact that this is their focus from the get-go is really exciting to me. We spoke about it a lot in the past, but one of the main improvements to building is the 25cm grid system, which is the idea that there's no large grid and small grid, there is now just grid. And additionally, there's some smaller 25cm blocks that you can place that are even smaller than the blocks you have currently in the game. And additionally, in the live stream, we found out that there are blocks that are even larger than what large grid was, but we'll talk about that later. And they also showed off that because the grid systems have been merged, you can place down blocks in the gaps of other blocks. They showed it off with this medbay here. You can see that they're placing blocks in a line inside the medbay, something that was not at all possible in Space Engineers. So this already looks like a massive improvement over what we currently have in the game. Undo and redo, which we looked at in the last teaser, is also a major feature of this game. If you make a mistake, you can undo it, and then you can change it back if you decided you actually did want it. We spoke about it before in the last video, but this is going to be an incredible change that massively improves how you build in the game. Whilst we'd heard that it was possible for a while, in the live stream and in the new teaser, we got our first look at the ability to place blueprints on your hotbar. In the stream, you can see that Marek builds these stairs, and then he copies them as a blueprint, and then he's able to keep placing them down afterwards. Additionally, in the teaser, they build this section of a ship, and then they copy that as a blueprint, and then they place it on their hotbar, and then they can keep placing it down afterwards. Again, this is another building feature that is going to be incredibly useful, especially when you have all those little blocks. You can just place all the blocks down you need to for your detailing, copy that as a blueprint, and then keep placing it down over and over. There's also partial copy. Rather than just saving something as a blueprint, you can look at something, select an area of it, and then just copy it and then place it back down straight away, just like a temporary blueprint of sorts. We got to see a more detailed look at the paint gun that we saw in the last teaser. We got to see that color choosing is now done from a radial menu as opposed to the old menu on the side, which makes sense because it's on the tool now, not on the player. So having it something that's actually used from the paint gun makes sense. And my hope is, because they've added this menu for the paint gun, maybe we'll get something like Build Vision in the game, where you look at a block and you can configure its settings by looking at it. Please, Keen? They've also added the option to replace color. They show this off when they have the green base, and they look at it, and then they just repaint the green part of the base red. So say you have a faction color on your ship, and you just want to change it to a different faction color, you don't have to repaint the entire ship, you can just repaint that one color. As we've discussed in the past, the speed limit has been increased to 300 meters per second, and additionally, they've added an option in the settings to change the speed limit between meters per second, kilometers per hour, and miles per hour. I'm probably going to leave it at meters per second, but the option's there if you want it. They've also mentioned, and this is a really good change, that impacts below 20 meters per second do not cause any damage. And this is going to be so good. One of the big problems with Space Engineers is that you tap your ship on something, and then like half your ship would explode because it took damage. But now, if you're traveling below 20 meters per second and you hit something, there'll be no damage, you'll be absolutely fine. This is going to be so good. To go with the speed limit changes, they've made changes to the jetpack as well. The jetpack now has a precision mode, which is default, and then a boost mode. The precision mode is capped to a much lower speed limit to allow you to easily move around and do stuff like building, and the boost mode allows you to go faster than that, boosting up to 300 meters per second for whatever you would need that for. Like for example, if you've accidentally got out of your cockpit of your ship and it's flying all the way away and you need to go and catch up with it. That's happened to all of us, don't pretend it hasn't. If you've ever walked on an asteroid in Space Engineers, you'll know that it jitters around as you do. It's just not good, it looks awful. And in the new game, mag boots now have camera stabilization, so you can walk along an asteroid completely smoothly with no issues. This was covered in the last teaser, but they showed off more of the improved destruction, where if you damage a block it fractures rather than just disappearing, and it looks really good. And I'm promising you, the first video that will come out on this channel when this is released will be me crashing things into each other, just to see how beautiful this new destruction is. As you've probably seen already, the graphics for this new game is much better. It has ray tracing, global illumination, tessellated terrain, parallax mapping, sleek armor textures, enhanced lighting, and so much more. So the game looks way better than Space Engineers ever did, and it should be around on par with where new releases are at the moment as well. But with everything, you can turn all these settings down, you can go to medium settings, and you'll be able to play on lower NPCs with that. They've said that not all the blocks that are currently in Space Engineers are going to be in the first vertical slice, and more blocks will be added as new vertical slices are released. On screen here, you can see all the blocks that will be available in the first vertical slice. We can see that this block here from the previous teaser is a reactor, and this block over here is a gravity generator, which I'm pretty sure no one guessed that it was. We can see a look at the gyroscope over here, and let me tell you, this looks really good. I love this gyroscope design, and there's a bunch of other blocks in here as well. You might have noticed that some of the blocks required for survival are missing. That's because A, survival is changing, so you don't necessarily need all those blocks anymore, and B, the survival update is the second vertical slice, and those blocks will be coming along then. They've also said, whilst the assembler and refinery are in the first vertical slice, they're not going to be functional, they're just decorative at the moment, but that'll be coming again in the survival vertical slice. As I mentioned earlier, on the stream they showed off there are blocks that are larger than what was large grid blocks, so this here is a 7.5 meter gyroscope, which makes it 3 times the width of the current gyroscope in the game. And again, this looks really good. This is such a better gyroscope design than what we currently have. I love that it moves, it's so good. They also showed off concept art for a 7.5 meter thruster as well. So I assume there's going to be tiny blocks, which are 25 centimeter. Then there's going to be what was small grid blocks, then what was large grid blocks, and then I guess these much larger 7.5 meter blocks as well. It does bring up the question whether or not Prototech will be in this game. I would doubt it if they're going to add these larger blocks, but we'll have to wait and see. They did speak about a couple of blocks that aren't in this first vertical slice. For example, rotors and pistons were discussed, and they said whilst they've been prototyped and worked on, they're not necessarily ready to release them yet, but they definitely will be coming in the future. As I mentioned earlier, there's going to be some smaller vertical slices as well. The 1.1 vertical slice will focus on the workshop, for the ability to upload and share your builds online. And they've said that this is going to be exclusive to Mod.io rather than the Steam Workshop, so that everyone is on the same platform. There's no half the stuff being on the Steam Workshop, there's no half the stuff being on Mod.io. It's all in one place. I won't lie, I was a little bit concerned about this. I've never really liked the Steam Workshop compared to things like Nexus mods, but I dislike the user interface on Mod.io even more. So I messaged some of the people at Keen, and they said not to worry, there will be an in-game UGC workshop, which I'm pretty sure UGC stands for user-generated content. This sounds like Mod.io is just the back end where the mods and blueprints are stored, but we'll be accessing them all in-game rather than through a third-party webpage. They've also since updated their roadmap on their website to stress that this is an in-game workshop to help clear up some confusion. And in theory, because this workshop is in-game, that means that Keen has full control over it, unlike Steam and Mod.io, so they'll be able to tailor it to do whatever they want, and more importantly, they can change it based on our feedback. So hopefully it can be better than both Steam and Mod.io. The 1.2 vertical slice is going to focus on improving mechanics and interface refinements. So basically, they made the first vertical slice, they got it ready to release, they did a bunch of testing with it and thought, some of this stuff needs a bit of iteration and needs a bit of work on it. And that's what this vertical slice is. And they've said this is kind of how it's going to work in the future. Whilst they're going to make the whole vertical slice and then move on to the next thing, that doesn't mean they're going to leave the old vertical slices like they are if they've got problems. They're going to go back and improve them as well. They also wanted to reiterate the fact that the vertical slices won't be perfect on release. They may contain bugs, they may contain imperfections, which the developers will be actively working to address alongside our feedback. It's also worth mentioning that as the game develops, they're going to continue to optimize it, so as the development goes on, the game will actually get better performance, and they've said that they're going to use this extra performance to increase the PCU cap. So over time, the PCU will get higher and higher, allowing you to place more blocks and ships. And the final of the smaller vertical slices is the 1.5 vertical slice, which is going to focus on modding, more specifically the V-Race 3 editor. Now the V-Race 3 editor is a new set of tools they've made for their engine, which are the same tools they use to develop the game. So effectively, modders are going to have the same tools to develop their mods that the developers have to make the game. Now this 1.5 update is only going to include data modding and not scripting, which means you can create new blocks, adjust existing ones, change things like the skybox, the speed limit and stuff like that, but the more complex mods that require scripting won't be available straight away. However, currently they're planning to release the scripting part of the modding alongside the survival vertical slice, which is the second one, so let's take a look at that. So, vertical slice number 2, planets and survival. Obviously, this vertical slice will focus on adding planets to the game and also survival mechanics. So let's start at what's happening with planets. For starters, the Almagest system. This is where the new game is set, and the Almagest system is a binary system, which means it has 2 stars. The main star that we see orbiting around us is called the Almagest star, and the second star, which will say static at the middle of the star system, is a brown dwarf called Delphos, which I think is Apollo's sun. Let me check that. Delphos? Yes, Apollo's sun. That useless Greek myth knowledge coming in clutch once again. A brown dwarf is like a smaller class of star, and they're not really stars. They're made of gas like stars, but because they don't collapse under their own gravity, they don't set alight. They're kind of like big gas giants as far as I understand, so I wonder if we can actually fly into Delphos. That would be really interesting. Actually, Zero, that's not how science works. Okay, thank you for telling me. There are initially 3 planets planned to be in this game, with the first 2 coming in this vertical slice. Those planets are Verdure, which is supposedly similar to the Earth-like planet, Chemic, which is going to be a kind of Mars-like planet, and there's also Byblos, which is going to be a water planet. However, as water isn't going to be in this vertical slice, that'll be coming later. So initially, we'll get the 2 planets and presumably Delphos, and they've also mentioned that there'll be moons, asteroid belts and asteroid fields in this game as well, but it isn't clear if these moons are coming in this vertical slice, as none of them are named. I would assume that asteroid fields are, as asteroids are needed for you to get resources, but belts? We'll see. However, I am very excited for some space geography. I hope the planets are closer together so you can actually see all of this, but we're not going to find out for a couple months. One of the things they keep mentioning over and over is that they want to complete the core experience first, and then they'll add other stuff later. And whilst planets are included in that core experience, they've said whilst they would like to add orbital mechanics, they don't consider that to be core experience, so that's something they'll be looking at later. Which is fine, make the game good first before we start adding stuff like that. So the colonists that arrive in the Almages system left in 2083 as part of the Bearing Project and travelled 10,000 light years away to this new star system, and that journey took around 10,000 years. They've also mentioned that there are multiple ways for colonists coming to the Almages system, so there's a lot of people coming here, and because of how far away it is, it's a one-way journey and none of these people can go back to Earth. And it sounds like that when we, the player, arrive, the colonists have been coming to the Almages system for around 10 years, so there are already people established here, there's already factions here. We'll cover that more when we get to Vertical Slice 5, which is NPCs. But it's not just going to be an empty solar system like Space Engineers 1 pretty much is. There's already going to be people here and established for us to meet. Hi, Future Editing Zero here. Before we move on to survival, I would like to quickly apologise for the below standard of editing that is coming up for the rest of the video. I don't have any footage about anything we're about to talk about, it's all just things they've said. And unfortunately this video is going up in less than 3 hours, so I don't really have time to make something. This is also the longest video I've ever made for this channel because I wanted to make sure absolutely everything discussed for Space Engineers 2 was included, and I've only had about 2-ish days to make it, so I've put in maximum effort over the past 2 days to make sure that it gets done. Anyway, like this video and subscribe to the channel if you appreciate the effort, and now back to the rest of the video. Moving on to survival, they've mentioned that there are 2 new types of building. The first type is backpack building, which is effectively the idea that the survival kit, which you previously needed to refine stone at the beginning of your game, is now built into your backpack. So you can mine resources with your drill, and then those resources are processed by your backpack, and then you can just start building with them. And the idea behind this is to decrease the difficulty ceiling of the beginning of the game to allow you to more easily just get up and go and play. They've mentioned that the backpack is slower and less efficient than the assembler and refinery, so you still will need those eventually. This is just to get you going at the beginning, and additionally backpack building only creates certain types of components, which is how Space Engineers works currently anyway. The survival kit can only build certain components, and the basic assembler and normal assembler also have different components they can build. The second type of building is called projection building, and this basically means that in survival you can build as if it was creative. One of the main ways to build in Space Engineers was to build in creative and then print that in survival, and whilst that is the best way to build, it also, well, sucks. The idea in Space Engineers 2 is that you can place projections of what you want to build, so you can just build as if you had the resources already, just place it all down exactly how you would like, and then you just weld up all the blocks afterwards. It'd be interesting if welding has changed as well, especially if there's really tiny blocks, but we don't know anything about that yet, so we'll have to wait and see. Continuing in the survival vein, they've also mentioned that there are plans for different types of refining. One of the things they mentioned was a smelter block, which would be interesting to see what they do with that. So it seems that this survival won't just be Space Engineers as it is currently. You build a couple of things and then you're done. It seems like they're going to add new blocks that weren't in Space Engineers to improve that survival experience to make it worth playing. Vertical Slice 3 is water and Vertical Slice 4 is multiplayer. We're probably going to merge these into one section as we don't really know much about either of them. They did confirm that underwater bases are possible, that things like submarines are possible, and as we already knew, that water will be simulated at a planetary-wide scale across the new planets, so it'll be on Byblos, which will be an entirely water planet, and I presume Verdure, being an Earth-like planet, will have water as well. The screenshot here appears to indicate that. And additionally, alongside this new water, they talk about there being dynamic weather as well. Now, I don't think they're going to simulate the entire water cycle because, lag, but it would be cool if things like puddles and stuff can generate if it rains. For those who wanted to pick up water, when they were talking about the air tightness mechanics and leaks, they said it's all the same system, so water and gas are all the same system, and they're working on ways to improve how air tightness works and leak detection works, as that's a big problem in the game currently, so that's very promising. And that also means that you're going to be able to pick up water and keep it in your ship somehow, which is very exciting, I won't lie. You're just going to be minding your own business, and then someone's going to fly over, me, and drop a load of water on your base. It's going to be some good stuff. They also mentioned that things like oil and lava and maybe some gases have been considered, but they didn't indicate if that was something they were planning to work on as part of the core experience or something they were planning on later, but it's definitely very exciting. I'd love to live out my fantasy of standing on the high ground as my best friend gets barbecued below me. As I mentioned, Vertical Slice 4 is multiplayer. Whilst multiplayer isn't coming immediately and is probably at least a year away, they did mention what they've got currently is massively improved over what is currently in the game. With the performance improvements that are already in this engine, combined with these multiplayer performance, I assume we're going to see much larger servers that are able to function at a consistently high sim speed. And they also said that alongside this multiplayer vertical slice, they're also going to add scripting as well, so like the programmable block and stuff like that. And one of the things they wanted to fix is that every single server has scripting disabled, and they've worked on ways of putting better safeguarding in place for servers to allow them to have scripting on, and for them not to worry about the performance impact of that. Vertical Slice 5, NPCs and Living Universe. Probably one of the more exciting ones on this list. I don't have any footage of this, so just enjoy whatever I'm putting on screen now. But they said that NPCs were being worked on at least 2 years ago. And they said as part of their tests, they give the NPC a job, which was to weld up a block. And that NPC then knew what he needed to do to weld up that block. So he needed to go away, get resources, come back and then weld it. And he just went ahead and did that with no interference. One of the biggest things they want in this new Space Engineers is a living universe where you don't feel alone, where there's other ships, other stations, other NPCs, stuff like that. And by NPCs, they mean literal human NPCs, engineers, not just AI drones. And I'm sure this is something that absolutely everyone wants and everyone is very excited for. But they did say that this vertical slice is probably at least a year away from now. Alongside the information about NPCs, we also learned about 4 prominent factions that will be in Space Engineers 2. The first one being Astronauts Without Borders, which is a faction that embodies the ideal of cooperation. And I'm pretty sure, let me just check. Astronauts Without Borders. Yes, Astronaut Without Borders is mentioned in Space Engineers. It's in my lore document. They were referred to as hippies, which is really interesting. Are they like space communists, or are they just like good friends? We'll have to wait and see. The second faction is the Legion of Engineers, looks directly at the camera, and they are a militarist faction that stand to defend humanity's progress. I'm not gonna lie, you had me at Legion, you didn't have me at militarist. Boo. Elokite communities are a strange group of religious isolationists, which is very vague. Maybe they worship the monolith, maybe they worship Clang, maybe they worship the cable, or maybe they worship something completely different. We'll have to wait and see. And there's also the Boatmen, which are apparently a spooky, mysterious cult born of tragedy. Whatever the heck that means. They sound like space pirates, if I'm honest. You know, boatmen, pirates, you know what I mean. And they've also said that in the Almager system, that there are some secrets that await us to find. It looks like someone was here before us, which is very interesting. Precursors, perhaps? Monolith mystery revealed? Am I more excited for this than I am for NPCs in water? You bet I am. I love me some lore. Lore video coming soon, like and subscribe. Beyond the vertical slices that we know about, we know that there is one that focuses on a story and campaign mode for the game. The game itself has a story and lore, which we've seen already with the Almager system teasers. And there'll be human NPCs, there'll be stations, there'll be factions, there'll be quests for you to do and stuff. But the story mode will be completely separate from that. So rather than building freely like you can in the sandbox mode, which is the default mode of the game, the story campaign will consist of missions where you'll go through and uncover the mysteries of the new system we've entered. Now, I really hope you can find the precursor stuff without the story campaign, because I feel like that'd be a little bit of a buzzkill. But I'm not opposed to a story campaign. I actually really like the scenarios that are in Space Engineers. Frostbite, despite being the most frustrating thing I've ever done for this channel, maybe second most frustrating, is still probably one of my favourite experiences I've had in Space Engineers. So if they want to add something on par with that, if not even better, I'm here for it. I'm ready. I would love to play through that in this game. The campaign follows 2 brothers called Miroslav and Ivan Sokol, and they've just arrived in the Almager system on board their colony ship, and this colony ship is attacked, and it's the Sokol brothers' job to help rescue all these survivors. So the player will be playing Miroslav, who apparently has a whole bunch of lore about him, and presumably Ivan will be an NPC that you have to work alongside. And it sounds like this story scenario will tie into the main mystery of the Almager system, so I'm here for it. I'll be playing this day one. That's the main vertical slices. I've just got some other notes of things to go through. First of all, the Pioneer Edition. This is a bit like the Deluxe Edition of Space Engineers. It includes the main game, the soundtrack, and a bunch of behind-the-scenes development material. And additionally, as more vertical slices are released, more stuff will be added to this. So if you're a mega fan of Space Engineers, I would definitely recommend getting this. Also, the game has a brand new soundtrack that I'll need to use in the background of my videos, so I'll personally definitely need this. Consoles, Linux, and Steamdeck are 3 other things to mention. Consoles won't be getting alpha access at this time. To put it quite simply, consoles don't really support the early access method. Xbox players will remember recently that there was a massive delay in getting the update out because Xbox just didn't wake up and approve the update for some reason. So Space Engineers 2 having regular updates in early access isn't something that'd be really possible for those platforms. But that doesn't mean that Space Engineers 2 won't come out on consoles. And it doesn't even mean that it won't come out in early access. But it won't be getting alpha access at this time. They did mention testing the game on Steamdeck, so potentially this will be a possibility in the future. And they also mentioned a possibility of it coming to Linux. For those 5 people that are always in my comment section moaning about the game not working on Linux, moan to Keen instead, because it sounds like something they're looking at. There was a huge amount of information released on the livestream, so hopefully you now know everything you need to know about Space Engineers 2. And additionally, when future information releases about the game, and also when the game itself drops, this will be the place to find out everything about it. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel to see that. A special thanks to my current supporters: Clone, Briarrose, Summit, Tarantula Fudge, The Wildcat, Splurgburger, Taurus 1834, Penguin, The Whisked Man, Banu, and Microwaved Toast. If you want to support the channel, you can become a YouTube member with the link in the description.